Today on Comicstorian, we're going to travel into the multiverse. What if Peter Parker and Mary Jane had a daughter? This is the Comicstorian channel. I take some comic books, I tear out all of the extra fluff plot and additional stuff going on, we cut down on the amazing art, and we give you the bare bones of it here so that I can give you an audio drama of that storyline. The purpose of this is to allow you to know what you're getting into if you want to start collecting comics. Because if you go buy this book, you're going to get more context, more art. All alterations are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Today we're going to be covering Spidergirl Volume 1. You see, in the 90s, there was an ongoing comic called Spidergirl, which explored the possibility of Peter Parker and Mary Jane finally having a daughter, and that daughter becoming Spidergirl. Today is going to be the origin story, a video that we created for our Patreons when they voted on it a little while ago, but now it's time to bring it to the YouTube channel. So enjoy this other universe. Here we go. Instinctively, she looks at the clock, confirming what she already knows. Time is running out, and there is almost a hush leading to a single point in time. Tonight is the night where she is destined to make a mark that will become a major turning point in her life. She runs, she aims, and nothing can stop her now. May Parker defies all logic, jumping into the air, slamming the basketball down into the hoop, scoring the winning point for Midtown High! And while the crowd cheers, her parents, Peter Parker and Mary Jane Parker, they notice something. Because, you know, a person shouldn't be able to jump that high. Not unless... No. They've been watching May for years. They've been watching for the signs. She shouldn't have inherited... Well, anyway. There's plenty of time to figure out a perfectly reasonable explanation for that. Right now, they need to congratulate their daughter for such an amazing play. But there's something in the back of her mind that warns her. It seems like her father, Peter, feels the same thing. Just as quickly as it has come, it is gone, like a shadow disappearing into the light. Peter wonders for a moment if his daughter noticed it too, but as her friends run up to her after the game, he decides he's going to keep it to himself. May goes off to a party with her friends Courtney and Jimmy, and Peter Parker and Mary Jane begin to wonder if what they saw was a fluke or something more. They've done everything as parents to keep May safe, even while Peter wore the Spider-Man costume. You see, May was only 2 years old when Spider-Man had his final confrontation with Norman Osborn, a battle that cost Norman his life. And Peter, well, he lost any desire to continue his dual identity. Elsewhere, as May is walking off with Courtney and Jimmy, she gets a strange yet familiar feeling, but this time it's different, sharper, more insistent that she needs to dodge. She pushes everyone out of the way just in time to avoid a blast from a pumpkin bomb that is thrown her way. And it's at that moment that she sees the Green Goblin, a foe that has long since disappeared, with Norman Osborn appearing before the young girl, telling her that he has a message for her father. Tell him the Green Goblin has returned, and we have unfinished business. May asks, how does a creep like him know her father? And the Green Goblin tells her, you'd be surprised to know. Tell him I'll be at the bridge at midnight tomorrow. He'll know what that means. She rushes home to tell her parents about what happened, but as they tell her that she just needs to rest for the night, the two parents begin to wonder. Norman Osborn has been dead, and even his son Harry has been dead, but what about Harry's son Normie? That could be the only explanation for a new Green Goblin. Peter makes a few calls to try and find Normie, but his mother Liz has been sick in the hospital, and, well, her husband Nelson hasn't seen Normie since Liz went in. Both Mary Jane and Peter begin to discuss what they need to do, because if Normie is the Green Goblin and May's powers are kicking in, what does the daughter of Spider-Man need to do next? The big debate is whether or not they should even tell her. And while this is going on, she is sitting at the top of the stairs, listening in on everything. On the next day, Peter goes out looking for some help from friends, other superheroes, while May confronts her mother about what she overheard, exclaiming that she doesn't even know who she is anymore. She is just a freak! After taking a deep breath, Mary Jane brings May up to the attic to explain the story of how her father was, in fact, the costumed hero, Spider-Man. In the chest, there's a second costume as well, and May asks who did it belong to, and Mary Jane says her Uncle Ben. She realizes that the spider thing runs in the family, like the Osborns and their green scene. So what are they going to do about Normie? Mary Jane goes on telling her that her father's going to do what he does best, make things right if he can. Meanwhile, Green Goblin approaches Peter. Hello, Uncle Pete! You didn't wear your play clothes. This date was supposed to be with Spider-Man. Confirming his suspicions now that they've met at the meeting spot, Peter tells Normie that Spider-Man doesn't exist anymore. He died the same night as Normie's grandfather. There's no need for them to fight. Normie shouts that Spider-Man isn't dead. "You one-legged loser! Where's my grandfather or my father? This ends when I'm standing over your corpse. Now change into the costume, or I'll have to ask young May." At that moment, a voice shouts for Green Goblin to put down Peter Parker, because Mary Jane gets out of the car stating that they have nothing to fear from Normie. "We used to babysit you and change your diapers." Normie reaches down, pulling something out of Peter's waistband. "Nice try, Auntie M, but look what Peter brought to the party. A gun! He knew what was at stake here." Normie turns his attention to Mary Jane, but just then, out of nowhere, May, wearing her own Spider-Man costume, swings in on her webs, kicking Normie back, telling him, "You want a spider person? Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot." Peter stumbles to the ground asking if that is May, and Mary Jane tells him that she told her everything, but she never thought, "Oh God." As May dodges Normie firing blasts from his fingers, he begins to yell, "This is unacceptable! It's your father that I must destroy." May tells him that she's sorry, but her dad's retired ever since your grandfather blew off his leg. May then webs up Normie's hand to stop him from shooting any more blasts, but he burns it away, and May realizes that he has an electroshock hand thingy. Just like her father, she manages to have the same sense of humor, firing off quips and keeping her opponent off balance, while she follows her instincts, moving, dodging all of Normie's attacks. But for a second there, she finds herself in freefall. At least, until she aims, tapping twice, and a string of web shoots onto the bridge, and May swings around, kicking Norman in the back, forcing him to act. He reaches for another pumpkin bomb, but there's a faint smile behind the mask, because she is secretly watching all of Normie's curious gadgets. Before Norman can throw, May webs up his hand, and Norman laughs, asking, "Do you think I'm an idiot? I've already shown you that your webbing means nothing." And she taunts him, calling him a loser, a kid playing dress-up who's a few donuts short of a dozen. "You can't blow off my webbing without igniting your bomb." As Normie activates his glove, he realizes what she meant, and the pumpkin bomb goes off in his hand. The Parkers watch as Normie falls out of the sky, barely conscious, unable to save him from the oncoming tractor trailer. It'd be easy to let him die, to end the circle of hate. But May thinks to herself, "You have a great power and an even greater sense of responsibility, and no one will die today. When you're in the zone, you're feeling loose and you're slamming the heat." So later, as the police arrive, Normie is taken away, and May watches, stating that even though he tried to kill them, she feels kind of sorry for him. Kind of stupid, huh? Peter tells her hardly. The Osborn saga has always been a tragedy, and they don't have to worry about that anymore. As Normie is put into the van, he yells out, "Spider-Girl! Spider-Girl! Doesn't she make her little head swirl? My little brown-eyed Spider-Girl! She does one heck of a spider twirl! Hey there! There goes Spider-Girl!" Foggy Nelson loads Normie up, stating, "Spider-Girl, huh? Poor kid has really lost it. You know, I've always wondered what happened to Spider-Man. Was he killed like Daredevil? Or did he manage to live happily ever after?" Peter asks how Liz is doing, and Foggy walks off, telling him not well. But like they say, where there's life, there's always hope. And God knows, hope is all we have sometimes. Hope and family. Later that night, the Parkers all gather around a rather impromptu ceremony, a farewell of sorts, as they toss all things Spider-Man into the fire. Not a word is spoken, but you can feel the weight of unasked questions. May desperately wants to reassure her parents that they have nothing to fear, that everything will return to normal. But she can't, because she can't predict the future. And all she knows for sure is that her name is Mayday Parker, and that this is the first day of the rest of her life. Instinctively, her arm lashes out to stop the alarm clock a second before it goes off, and she remembers something. She's May Parker, a straight-A student and starter for Midtown High's girls basketball team. Most of her friends and teachers consider her average. She's an all-American teacher. But oh, wait until they see her now. While preparing for school, she thinks back to her revelation that she is in fact the daughter of the costumed hero Spider-Man, and even has some of his powers. But even after stopping the Green Goblin, her father didn't want her following in his footsteps, which ultimately led to him losing one of his legs. And thus, May's career as a costumed crime fighter was over before it ever really began. Or was it? During lunch, May decides to stop by the police station to try and get a better understanding of just who Spider-Man was by talking to Uncle Phil Urich. Phil isn't uncle by blood, but he's been her father's assistant at the police lab for as long as she can remember. She tells him that she is writing a story on Spider-Man for a history project. But Phil says that she should really talk to her father about it. He worked at the Daily Bugle, took a lot of pictures of that spider guy. Though she must know, everyone pretty much agrees on how Spider-Man got his start after some sort of freak accident. You see, originally, Spider-Man was wearing the costume for himself, picking up side jobs until he deliberately ignored a cry for help and allowed a fleeing burglar to escape. A few days later, his inaction came back when the same burglar murdered someone close to him. He always used to have a saying, it was like great power, yada yada, responsibility. But it's been so long that Phil's forgotten. May decides to feel for her father, trying to understand what he must have felt. But just then, Peter and Captain Reyes walk in with Peter asking what she's doing there. She told him she wanted lunch, but Peter tells him that he's a bit busy. As everyone begins to leave the station, a familiar tingle comes over May. And after a quick glance at her father, she sees that he also is getting that tingle. They look across the street to see someone clearly out of place, and Peter says that this is where they part ways. She needs to get back to school before she's late. So she decides to take off until she remembers the story about Spider-Man ignoring the robber and how she isn't going to let something like that happen to her father. So May interrupts the stalker, giving him a good shakedown, and then watches him run off to see where he's going. Once she sees the location, she runs back to the house to take the pair of web shooters that her father missed when they destroyed the costume, and all of the equipment from the night of Green Goblin. Peter didn't want her following in his footsteps, but this is a one-time occurrence. A situation has been forced on her by circumstance. So she quickly makes her way to the clothing store where she saw the suspicious man walking and overhears a conversation. The man from before tells his boss that he is sorry that they couldn't take out the target, but he was jumped. May then sees a group of men all pointing their guns at the stalker, and his boss stating that surely he could have come up with a better story than that. But while he's trying to talk his way out of this, a thug spots May, calling out to everyone that they've got a crazy ninja lady spying on them. She jumps down, dodging gunfire as she gets out of harm's way, but then finds herself face to face with this Mr. Nobody stalker himself. She asks where did he pop out of, and Mr. Nobody tells her to stop insulting his intelligence. She wouldn't be here if she didn't know that he could teleport. Most of the goons begin to surround her, so May gets to work webbing everyone up until the web shooters jam up. She doesn't know if the cartridges ran out or if they were just really old at this point, but she realizes she has to think of something. Just then, Mr. Nobody teleports again, stating that it looks like he was wrong. She's obviously a highly skilled assassin. Her spider sense blares as she begins to dodge all of the incoming gunfire when she realizes that she could just use that to put a stop to Mr. Nobody. She closes her eyes for a moment and focuses. And the next time that Mr. Nobody teleports in, May throws herself, tackling him. But just when she thought the day had been saved by Spidergirl, Captain Reyes and the police arrive, yelling for everyone to freeze. Mr. Nobody teleports away, while May makes a break for the window. She leaves the police with just the henchmen. A little while later, the forensics team, including May's father Peter and Phil, show up to process the scene, with Phil mentioning that this place was hit by some lady ninja. Now that's when Peter realizes, Lady Ninja? Yeah, that sounds suspicious. He takes off going back home, and while he's gone, Phil finds some webbing. As Peter gets back to the room to talk to May, he sees her sleeping in her bed, so he decides that the conversation about whether or not she's a superhero can wait. Once Peter leaves, May crawls out of the bed, thinking to herself how it's funny how all of this worked out. Her father became a hero because someone died. Thanks to her actions, her father will live. There's a lot to be said about being proactive. As the following days came, May worked quietly in her room knowing what she must do. She must work on a proper costume. She isn't sure what the future holds, but all she knows for sure is that her name is May Parker, and at least for the foreseeable future, she's also the stunning Spider-Girl. It was another nice day of web slinging for May when she found a group of masked men who were up to no good and decided to step in. She was getting used to the quick-witted banter while absolutely styling on the goons when she noticed a weird tinkling sensation that she was being watched from the rooftops. She looked up to see a man in the shadows, asking if that again was Mr. Nobody, the teleporting fiend she just fought. But then the spider sense rivets her attention back to the fight at hand and forces her to leap backwards, barely enough to avoid a rather explosive entrance of Crazy 8, the costumed villain donning threads of black and white, equipped with dozens of 8-balls filled with all sorts of deadly surprises. Crazy 8 says that he was glad that she decided to drop in and help relieve the drudgery of the otherwise routine evening's toil. May has read up about this creep, heard her dad complain about him. He's a ruthless psycho who thinks that he's a real funny man. His costume designed to juggle balls that are laden with all sorts of dangerous tricks. Crazy 8 laughs as he throws ball after ball, overwhelming May to the point of having to retreat. He then shouts, "What a disappointment! If I were the original Spider-Man, I'd sue that girl for disgracing the costume." A few blocks away, May stops to catch her breath, contemplating the heavy weight of what it means to even be a superhero because she literally could have just been killed. Instantly, she thinks back to her parents, trying to imagine their torment They arrive at the city morgue to identify her dead body. But then a voice cuts through the silence asking, "What's the matter, little girl? Having second thoughts?" May already knows it's the man she sensed from before, but who is he? Slowly, almost tantalizingly slow, he oozes out of the shadows, and the masked man tells her to go home. She doesn't belong here. He's the Dark Devil, and he is sending her back to her dolls and frilly playthings. As a fiery baton is thrown, May jumps out of the way, stating that she's heard of him. He's a vigilante like her, so what's the big deal? They're supposed to be on the same team. She launches into an attack, but Dark Devil fades into the shadows, vanishing right before her very eyes. She thinks back to herself that maybe the rumors are true about this creep, that he is some sort of ghostly manifestation of the first man without fear. Dark Devil then reemerges, stating that Crazy 8 spooked her earlier. He shattered her confidence, made her doubt in her abilities. Being a superhero is no game, little girl. The slightest hesitation could cost innocent lives. She stumbles back, asking what gives him the right to judge. And Dark Devil tells her that he is the one who has often tasted death. Trust him. She wouldn't like it. However, if she truly believes that she is worthy of the costume that she wears, meet him at Pier 87 tomorrow at midnight and be prepared to face the ultimate test. Crazy 8 threatened her life. Dark Devil questioned her validity. Confused and disturbed, May has no choice but to return home to Forest Hills. She begins to ask herself if she even has what it takes to wear her father's webs, because this is no game. Lives depend on her actions. Can she actually say that she possesses the necessary dedication, courage, and sense of responsibility? But meanwhile, while his daughter is plagued with questions, Peter is pondering his own situation. He's terrified for his little girl, his baby, sneaking out at night like he used to. How can he confront her? How can he be the hypocrite? How can he convince her that what was so right for him at a young age to do is very wrong for her? After May goes to the crime lab the next day during lunch, Phil informs her that he found webbing at the last crime scene. She asks him not to say anything to her father. And with that, Peter and May go off on their own for their little lunch, where they awkwardly sit there, both of them trying to say something, both of them trying to enter this conversation that they need to have, but neither of them doing it. And Peter just ending with that he loves their little get-togethers. Just the two of them. May agrees, just the two of them. That night, May makes her way to Pier 87 to find more of Crazy 8's men loading up a cargo ship with whatever it is that they are hauling. She sneaks into the boat and begins to take out the men, telling herself that she needs to confront her fears. That if this is a test, she's going to ace it. A few seconds later in the cabin, a man is thrown through the door as May stands there demanding that Crazy 8 come out and play. He arrives telling her that he's happy to oblige a loyal fan, but she seems to have caught him at a disadvantage. "The boys will keep you company while I gather a few personal items." All of the goons quickly rush in, piling on May, but she throws them out onto the deck as Crazy 8 begins to throw more of his 8 balls at them. She dodges the stringed bola, but May's spider sense goes off when the next set of balls grows spikes. Trying to keep herself calm, May jumps back, grabbing a hold of a pole, swinging herself, launching back towards Crazy 8. He tells her that that was very impressive, but she will soon see that he too is a trained acrobat. Another set of 8 balls are thrown, except these ones are explosives. Knowing she's going to land with them, May quickly pulls a card out of her father's old playbook, creating a web cocoon for herself, barely surviving the blast. Crazy 8 tells her that he's delighted to have her in his company, but unfortunately they must part. He throws a sonic grenade, throwing off her senses. And then as more explosives are thrown, she jumps off the boat, with Crazy 8 laughing that he doesn't believe it. She pulled another fade. "You ran out on me as soon as the going got tough! You might want to reconsider your superhero career path." But at that moment, she swings around, kicking him in the back, knocking him out. For a moment, a smile grows beneath her mask, but that grin quickly fades when her spider sense alerts her of something. She turns back to see Dark Devil, asking if she is proud of herself. "Enjoy the victory, for whatever it's worth." She asks why is he hassling her, and Dark Devil tells her, "I am merely trying to forestall an unnecessary funeral. You were exceptionally lucky tonight, but that luck doesn't last." As Dark Devil leaves, May is left, stating that that's almost funny. Crazy 8 treats her with respect and tries to kill her, but Dark Devil mocks her and tries to save her. Her life is suddenly brimming with little ironies, like her wretched attempt to be worthy of her father's webs. With May's life getting more hectic, secretly living as the new costumed hero of New York, she tries to keep some sort of normal life as the daughter of the original Spider-Man, Peter Parker. Peter tells Mary Jane to stop fussing over his tie. And she tells him that she just wants everyone to see how handsome Peter really is. Today is a big day for Peter as he is meeting with the mayor later to receive a special commendation for his work at the police lab. Peter then tells May that the ceremony is at 6 sharp. Any chance that she can make it? And she tells him, of course, she wouldn't miss it for the world. So after school, some of May's friends are going over to the Fantastic Five's headquarters to visit the museum, giving her a chance to talk to her crush, Brad Miller. But of course it doesn't go the way she wants as May's spider sense goes off to an oncoming threat. Right in the middle of the crowd, a portal opens up and an old man steps through, stating that he apologizes for intruding, but he suggests that they all calmly walk towards the nearest exit. While he has no desire to harm anyone, he will warn them in advance he will not suffer any interference. May tells the others to go as she makes a quick stop into the women's bathroom to suit up. The man makes his way to a power cell on display, stating that he needs this to get back home. It'll help him generate a warp spiral powerful enough to open the door. And a voice asks him, "Home? You want home? Have you ever tried closing your eyes and clicking your heels? I hear it's the most accepted method." May leaps in, kicking the man away, but then is thrown aside as he informs her that the spider person in his world is a he. May does what she can, dodging all of the man's attacks, but then her spider sense goes off again, and May finds herself facing not only some crazed man, but the Fantastic Five as they have now arrived. Franklin Richards informs them that the museum security called them, and it's their old friend Spiral. But then Thing looks at May. "Who's the babe in the spider suit?" Johnny Storm says that she looks like, "Nah, it can't be. That was too many years ago." The small robot that now contains Reed Richards' mind flies up, stating, "Whoever she is, we better contain her for now." But the Skrull, Lila Storm, tells him to leave it to her. Lila transforms into a large creature to pin May down, as May yells, "Wait, I'm on your side!" The fighting continues all over the place, with Spiral yelling out, "Blast that Spidergirl! If it wasn't for her, I'd already be home!" Oh well, when life gives you lemons, you always toss them in innocent bystanders. He focuses his blast on the ceiling, causing it to break apart, but then Reed is quick to jump in and save everyone. May thinks back to how Reed suffered an accident that left his body mangled, but he refused to accept his condition, designing this new robotic body for himself. And during that confusion, Spiral grabs a hold of the power cell, escaping. And with no bad guy around, May slips off before the Fantastic Five can arrest her. She runs on with her friends, expecting to go to her dad's big day, but then she overhears Reed Richards explaining that they've tracked down Spiral to a nearby warehouse. She's debating what to do. Should she go to her dad's big celebration or go try and see what happens with the villain? And she decides that she should have time to go watch what happens with the villain. She watches as the fight begins, still telling herself that she can't get involved, but after seeing Spiral quickly subdue the entire Fantastic Five, she leaps in. But as she begins to battle against Spiral, he declares that she has caused him a considerable amount of inconvenience, and he wants to return the favor. He generates a portal, and she feels herself being pulled inside, and unable to get a final shot in at Spiral to stop him, she aims for the next best thing, grabbing the power cell and pulling on it. She pulls the power cell into the portal with herself, but Franklin quickly follows and drives the car in after her. Trapped in an alternate dimension with monsters everywhere, May tells herself that this isn't so bad. At least she's got someone as cute as Franklin. While fighting back the beast, Franklin tells her that he assumes that she is Spider something, and she informs him that she is Spidergirl. So he tells her that it's smart thinking grabbing the power cell. If it's as important as Spiral says it is, then he'll have to come after them. Franklin then asks if she has any real relation to the original Spider-Man, and she stutters, asking why does he ask that? He then tells her that because him and Uncle Johnny used to hang out together. And she shouts, "I am pleading the fifth!" But before long, the portal opens up as May and Franklin fall back into the museum. Franklin asks why they're there, and the Thing informs him that it took them a while to convince Spiral to bring them back, but eventually he came around to the Fantastic Five's thinking. So May hands Johnny the power cell, stating that she really hates to fight and run, but Johnny tries to stop her because they want to know who this spider person is. But it's Franklin who steps up, stating that she deserves her privacy. And as far as he's concerned, she's good people. She rushes over, realizing what time it is, but as she gets to the ceremony, she only sees her mother, Mary Jane, sitting there. Mary Jane tells her that it was a nice ceremony and too bad that she missed it. May looks around asking where her father is, but Mary Jane gets her purse, stating that she sent him ahead to the restaurant to celebrate with Phil and some of their cop buddies. He wanted to wait for her, but she told Peter not to bother. Pretty obvious that May currently has much greater responsibilities in her life. With word getting around the city that there's a new spider person among them after the fight with the Fantastic Five in the museum, it wasn't long before May's parents found out that she has been sneaking out to play hero. While watching the news report of Spidergirl before school, Peter begins to shout, asking if she thinks that being a superhero is a game because it cost him his leg and almost his life. She tries to find words to respond, but Mary Jane steps in, telling them, please, there's no need to shout. They've been going at it since the reports came out last night. It's time that he went to work and May went to school. Peter heads off, stating that they're going to finish it later, and May tries to thank her mother for backing her up, but then Mary Jane freaks out on her, telling her that she's acting very irresponsibly. So after trying to defend herself against Mary Jane, May eventually goes to school. Two of her friends begin to try and argue in the middle of the school hallway, but eventually they bump into the school's janitor, Carlton Hackmutter. Jimmy gets up asking if he can help the janitor, but Hackmutter grabs his mop, swinging it, yelling, "You all have no respect! I've been cleaning this school since before you were born. Go on, get out of my sight!" As they leave, Hackmutter mutters to himself as he moves his cleaning supplies to the basement. He gets into what is apparently his workshop as he flips on a light switch that displays his collection of dragon figures and models. And he declares that some of these are real expensive, that he would have quit long ago if he wasn't trying to keep that collection current. Like this medallion, one of his most expensive pieces, a one-of-a-kind piece from all the way from ancient China. The dealer even tried to convince him that it possessed certain mystical properties, but that was just to con up the price. During lunch, May calls up her Uncle Phil to try and get something to eat, wanting to know what her father knows about her. There was a time when he did mention to her in private that he too wore a costume, and since finding out that there might be a new Spider-Man, he wanted to relive some of those glory days. May asks if her father mentioned anything, and Phil laughs. Peter goes out of his way to avoid anything superhero related. Been that way for years. But there have been some things that her father did tell him that he is not at liberty to repeat, but he would like to offer her the same thing. If there's anything she wishes to confide in him, he won't repeat it. May says that she'll keep that in mind, but does her dad know about the meeting like this? And Phil tells her, nah, he took off before she phoned. Said an old friend called for a surprise lunch, Johnny Storm. Across town, at the diner, Peter and Johnny sit across from each other, with Johnny stating, so, are we gonna bring up the elephant in the room? And Peter asks him, what, Spidergirl? Johnny tells him that he was surprised when she first showed up at the museum, and he couldn't figure out who it was, but then he remembered that Spider-Man, Peter Parker, had a daughter about the right age. You must be proud. It was the same for Reed when Franklin finally joined the team. That was, well, before the accident. But while Peter tries not to admit anything, back at Midtown High, May gets back just before lunch ends to hear Jimmy and Moose going at it again. The two are bickering and arguing as Hackmutter is cleaning up the mess, but as he picks up the broken pieces of glass, he cuts himself, and he shouts out, "Great! Just great!" He rushes off to the basement, muttering to himself that he is going to have to clean this cut. But some of the blood then drips onto the ancient medallion, the one that isn't actually supposed to be mystical, is it? Suddenly there's a flash of light, and Hackmutter asks, What is happening to me? Something strange and wonderful. As the light fades, Hackmutter looks at himself, and he's now transformed into a hulking dragon. Upstairs, May walks to class when her spider sense goes off, and Hackmutter's giant hand bursts through the ground. Everyone begins to run, with Hackmutter asking, "Oh, did I scare you? Good, it's about time you noticed me." As Hackmutter begins to destroy everything in sight, May slips off to change, but hesitates. She isn't supposed to involve herself in all of this, but she can't let her friends get hurt. In the next class, Hackmutter breaks down the wall, shouting, "Clear out! All you worthless punks need to get out of here!" Hackmutter then turns his attention towards Brad Miller, but before he could attack, May jumps in, kicking, asking, "Why don't you look at me for a moment?" Hackmutter swings back, stating that he recognizes her. "You're one of those new second-generation costumed vigilantes I've read so much about. I've always dreamed of being like Captain America, Conan, John Carter, or Jim Kirk. But I'll settle for reading about their adventures or following them on television." May tries to subdue him, asking if he wanted to be a hero, what is stopping him now? And Hackmutter whips her with his tail, yelling, "Forget it! Those dreams died long ago, but after a lifetime of being discarded and disrespected, it is time for payback!" Hackmutter then begins to make his way out, throwing a piece of debris at Jimmy, which out of nowhere, Moose then jumps in to push him out of the way and save him. May asks herself if Moose just saved Jimmy. Hackmutter must have hit him harder than she thought. Time to repay the favor by shutting down his destructive eye beams. She webs up his eyes and he blasts through them, asking if she thought those cheesy webs would stop him. May begins to throw chairs and anything that she can get her hands on to try and move him away from the people, and then says that this should be the part where he talks about his backstory so that she can learn some clues on how to defeat him. Hackmutter laughs, asking, "Do you think I'm that stupid?" But as he follows, May makes a stomp into one of the holes that Hackmutter created, which leads to the basement. She sees all the dragon figurines, stating, "Man, this is a nice collection. I really hate to trash it." He begins to swing through, stomping, asking what does she want, and May continues to juggle some of the figures, stating that she was wondering what would happen if she started tossing all these into the air. He lunges at her, but May dodges, and then Hackmutter punches into the school's electrical panel, electrocuting himself. After having Hackmutter taken away, May then changes back into her normal clothes and quickly slips out before anyone could ask questions. But as she gets to the door, Mary Jane asks how does she feel? Is she alright? May says yeah, why wouldn't she be? And Peter yells that they heard what happened at the school. It was all over the news. Spider-Girl was fighting some dragon monster. He tells him to relax. She doesn't mean to be disrespectful, but there was a lot more at stake here than his feelings. She didn't know if Hackmutter really intended to hurt anyone or just wanted to give them a bad fright. Either way, she wasn't going to gamble with the lives of her friends. Spider-Girl has a responsibility to act, and so she did. She doesn't want anyone to ever suffer because Spider-Girl failed to help when she should have. Peter rubs his neck, realizing what his daughter just told him. And he looks away. And May asks, "Well, what do we do from here?" And there you have it, Spider-Girl Volume 1. Now, we only ever covered Volume 1 over on the Patreon, so if you want more of it here, like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments down below. Benny, I'd love to see where this goes. Can you cover the whole series? Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time right here.